Have you ever imagined uncovering a secret hidden for more than 70 years? A secret buried in a forgotten library? One that involves missing scientists, an $80 million fortune, and a plan to save humanity from itself? This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a true story. Or almost. And what if I told you that this secret was never meant to be revealed? That it was protected for decades by people who believed the world wasn't ready to know it? Today, you're going to hear the story of Arthur Langdon, the invisible archivist who found the map to one of the greatest financial and ethical mysteries of the modern era. But before we begin, tell me something. Where are you listening to this podcast from? Reply in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with 3 friends who love a good mystery and conspiracy story. Now, take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear may change the way you see the past and the future.
Act 1. The Guardian of Silence. Arthur Langdon was the kind of man who went unnoticed, even by those who knew him. At 62 years old, with gray hair always combed back, thick-framed glasses, and a brown suit that looked like it came from a 1970s thrift store, he was the chief archivist of the New York Municipal Library, a position he had held for more than 3 decades. Every day, Arthur arrived at 7:45 a.m., drank his black coffee with no sugar in the second-floor break room, and went down to the basement, where the oldest and most forgotten records of the city were kept. It was there, among shelves of rusting iron and faded cardboard boxes, that he felt at home. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of pages turning or the soft scraping of his shoes against the cement floor. That November afternoon, the rain poured heavily over the library's stained glass windows. The sound of the drops echoed like a melancholic symphony, perfect for Arthur's introspective mood. He was reorganizing a section of records from the 1940s when he noticed an unmarked box stacked behind a row of post-war accounting ledgers. The box was covered in a fine layer of dust and cobwebs, as if no one had touched it in decades. Curious, Arthur pulled it out carefully. Inside, there was a single, dark leather folder with the initials E.H. discreetly engraved in the lower corner. He opened it with the delicacy of someone handling a sacred artifact. The contents were modest but intriguing. A map folded several times, a handwritten letter on yellowed paper, and a bank receipt dated June 12, 1947. Arthur adjusted his glasses and examined the receipt. The amount was absurd. $80 million. The name of the beneficiary? Halberg Foundation. He had never heard of that foundation. The originating bank was Swiss, stamped with a seal from Geneva. The deposit had been made in cash, something practically impossible today. With his heart racing, he picked up the letter. The handwriting was elegant and firm, yet carried an almost tangible urgency. The signature at the end confirmed it, E.H. The content was even more disturbing. If you are reading this, it is because time has finally caught up with us. The Fortune Holder Project was conceived not as an emergency plan, but as a seed of reconstruction. The world as we know it is on the brink of an ethical collapse. The truth will be buried, the facts distorted, and science silenced. This fund is the last hope. Protect it. Use it only when the darkness is complete. Arthur read the letter 3 times, trying to absorb every word. Fortune holder? He had never heard of it. And who was E.H.? Why would someone hide such an immense fortune with such an enigmatic message? He unfolded the map. It was a sketch of New York City, with red markings around certain buildings, the library itself, the old Columbia University building, and an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn. In the bottom corner, a note. Convergence point. 40 degrees, 42 minutes, 46 seconds north, 74 degrees, 00 minutes, 21 seconds west. Arthur typed the coordinates into his computer. The indicated location was in Lower Manhattan, not far from the old financial district, a place that in the 1940s swarmed with war secrets, espionage, and money. He leaned back in his chair, the sound of the rain now resembling a warning drumbeat. Something inside him, perhaps the old historian's instinct, perhaps simply the loneliness of a life without great emotions, pushed him to move forward. That discovery wasn't just an archival find. It was an invitation, a calling. Arthur knew that following that thread, he might unearth something many would rather keep buried. But he also knew that if he didn't, he would never forgive himself. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not as an archivist, but as a detective of time, a guardian of forgotten truths. He stored the documents in his leather briefcase, locked the box back in the cabinet, and climbed the stairs. The library was empty. The rain still fell, but now, for Arthur, each drop seemed to mark the rhythm of a new mission. That night, he did not go home at his usual time. Instead, he sat at his desk, surrounded by old books, microfilmed newspapers, and city maps. He would begin with E.H. Who was he, and what exactly was the Fortune Holder Project? The guardian of silence had awakened, and the world, without knowing it, was about to hear his voice.
Act 2. Echoes of the Past. Arthur Langdon did not sleep that night. The discovery of the mysterious folder had ignited something inside him, a flame that had been extinguished long ago. He spent hours digging through digital records, old newspapers, and confidential files, available only to library employees. His goal was clear: to discover who E.H. was and what the Fortune Holder Project meant. The first clue came from a 1951 article published in a now-defunct scientific magazine called Horizons of Tomorrow. The author? Edward Hallberg, a theoretical physicist, specialist in quantum energy, and informal advisor to the U.S. government during World War II. Hallberg disappeared in 1952 at the age of 47, leaving no trace. Officially, he was declared dead in 1955. But the article Arthur found mentioned ethical containment structures and civilizational reconstruction funds, terms that echoed the letter he had read. Arthur began to assemble a puzzle. Hallberg wasn't just a scientist, he was a visionary. And, by all accounts, a silent conspirator. With every new discovery, Arthur felt he was being watched. In the library cafeteria, a man in a gray suit always sat 2 tables behind him. At the subway station, the same man boarded the same car but never looked directly at him. Arthur tried to ignore it, but the sense of surveillance was constant. Even so, he pressed on. In Columbia University's archives, he found records of a research group led by Hallberg between 1943 and 1946. The name of the project was Fortune Holder. The documents were vague, but they mentioned meetings with Swiss bankers, secret encounters with members of Congress, and a series of financial transfers to accounts in Geneva. Arthur realized that Hallberg had created a fund, not only financial, but philosophical, a plan to protect humanity from itself. But why? What did he know that others didn't? The answer came from an unexpected place: science fiction literature. Hallberg had published 3 novels under the pseudonym E.H. Langston. Arthur found the books in a used bookstore in Brooklyn. Each story seemed absurd at first: time travel, totalitarian governments, moral collapse. But upon rereading carefully,
He realized that every chapter hid coordinates, dates, and codes. In the second book, The Guardian of the Last Truth, there was a passage that read, "When the pillars of reason are corroded by greed and lies, the vault shall be opened, but only by the one who lives in silence and understands the value of memory." Arthur felt a chill. He was the archivist, the guardian of silence, and now the holder of a truth no one else seemed to know. He began writing everything down: names, dates, connections. He built a board in his workspace with red strings linking Hallberg to politicians, scientists, and financial institutions. The map found in the folder pointed to 3 locations in New York, all with a history of secret operations during the Cold War. Camille, an investigative journalist who frequented the library, noticed Arthur's obsessive behavior. Curious, she approached him. He hesitated, but eventually decided to trust her. He showed her the documents, explained his discoveries. Camille, fascinated, revealed that she had investigated Hallberg years earlier, but had never found solid evidence. Together, they decided to follow the leads to Geneva. That was where the money was. That was where the secret was hiding. But before leaving, Arthur received an envelope with no sender. Inside, a single sentence: "Some secrets exist to protect the future, others to bury it." The man in the gray suit was closer than ever, and Arthur knew that once he set out on this journey, there would be no turning back. Act 3. The Geneva Key.
The flight to Geneva was silent. Arthur Langdon, seated by the window, stared at the clouds as if they were blank pages waiting to be written on. Camille, the journalist now accompanying him, flipped through Edward Hallberg's books, marking passages with colorful sticky notes. They knew they were chasing something big, maybe dangerous, but neither of them could stop. Upon arriving in Switzerland, they went straight to the bank listed on the 1947 receipt. The building was discreet, with a gray stone facade and solid wooden doors. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet, almost ceremonial. A manager received them politely, but with suspicious eyes. Arthur presented the receipt and Hallberg's letter. The manager led them to a private room, where he revealed that the account still existed, but was protected by an unusual authentication system. "It's not an ordinary password," he said. "It's a mathematical sequence, a code that can only be solved by someone who understands the logic behind it." Arthur and Camille exchanged glances. They knew where to look. Back at the hotel, they spent hours analyzing Hallberg's books. In The Guardian of the Last Truth, they found a sequence of numbers hidden in seemingly unrelated chapters. Each number corresponded to a page, a word, a letter. It was a literary puzzle, and Hallberg had left the key. After decoding the sequence, they returned to the bank. The manager typed the numbers into an old terminal. After a few seconds of silence, a green light turned on. The vault was unlocked. Inside, there was more than money. There were documents, audio tapes, photographs, and a handwritten manifesto by Hallberg. The title, "Fortune Holder, A Plan for the Day When Everything Fails." The manifesto was clear. Hallberg believed the world would one day face an age of disinformation, authoritarianism, and moral collapse. He predicted the manipulation of science, the weakening of democracies, and the rise of regimes that would use technology to control truth. The $80 million fund was not just a financial reserve, it was a reconstruction plan, a project to support independent journalists, ethical scientists, educators, and defenders of freedom. This fund must not be touched until the darkness is complete, the text read. When reason is silenced and hope becomes subversive, Fortune Holder will be the last candle burning. Arthur felt a tremendous weight. He had not just discovered a secret, he had become the guardian of a legacy. Tearfully, Camille suggested they publish the story, but Arthur hesitated. What if the fund were diverted? What if governments or corporations used it for dark purposes? Hallberg had trusted that the secret would be protected, not exploited. As they debated, the hotel phone rang. It was a male voice, calm yet firm. "Mr. Langdon, we know what you found. We are not here to stop you. We are here to ensure that the original purpose is respected. Meet us tomorrow, 9 a.m., at Café Rousseau." The call ended. Arthur and Camille knew they were being watched, but they also knew they had reached a point of no return. The vault was open, the secret revealed, and now the world, or at least part of it, was about to respond.
Act 4. The Price of Truth.
Café Rousseau in Geneva was small, discreet, and old, exactly the kind of place where secrets feel at home. Arthur Langdon and Camille arrived at 8:45 a.m., took a table in the back, and waited. At exactly 9, the man in the gray suit walked in. Without ordering anything, he sat down in front of them. "Mr. Langdon, Ms. Camille, my name is Conrad. I work for an organization that monitors strategic assets created during the Cold War. What you've found is real and dangerous." Arthur held his gaze steady. Camille folded her arms. Conrad continued. "The Fortune Holder project was one of Edward Hallberg's last efforts before he disappeared. He believed the world would enter an ethical collapse, that governments would be corrupted, truth manipulated, and science discredited. The fund was created to withstand that, but Hallberg knew that if it was revealed too soon, it would be destroyed." Camille interrupted. "And who decides when it's the right time? A secret committee? An invisible organization?" Conrad gave a humorless smile. "The right time is when there are no alternatives left, when democracy is no longer a choice, but a memory, when truth has no voice anymore." Arthur took a deep breath. "And are we close to that?" Conrad looked out the window. "Closer than you think." He handed them an envelope. Inside were instructions to keep the fund protected, contacts of trustworthy individuals, and one clause. If the fund was used without authorization, it would be frozen indefinitely. "You have a choice," Conrad said. "You can publish the story and risk the fund being diverted, or you can protect Hallberg's legacy and wait." After he left, Arthur and Camille debated for hours. Camille wanted to publish. The truth, in her view, needed to be known. Arthur feared that the money would be captured by dark interests, that Hallberg's plan would be corrupted. They chose a middle ground. Camille would write the article, but omit crucial details: the name of the bank, the exact amount, the codes. She would reveal the existence of the Fortune Holder project, the ideals behind it, and Hallberg's legacy, but the fund would remain protected. The article was published 3 days later. The headline, "The Vault of Hope, the secret project that could save democracy." Within hours, it went viral. Governments denied everything. Experts debated. Conspiracy theorists multiplied. But something shifted. The idea that someone, decades ago, had foreseen the ethical collapse and created a plan to fight it struck a chord. Arthur returned to New York. The library welcomed him as always, silent, indifferent.
But he knew he was no longer the same. He had crossed an invisible line. He had become part of a story that wasn't in the books, a story still being written. Camille continued investigating. She received threats, invitations, offers. But she kept her integrity. The fund remained untouched, the secret protected. But the ideal, that now belonged to the world.
Act 5. The Legacy.
Time passed. Camille's article continued to make waves weeks after its publication. In forums, podcasts, universities, and even in parliaments, the name fortune holder had become a symbol of something greater. The idea that someone, decades ago, had believed so deeply in the future of humanity that they created a plan to save it, even if that meant disappearing. Arthur Langdon, back at the New York Public Library, resumed his routine, but he was no longer the same man. The silence of the archives now carried a different weight. Every folder, every document, every yellowed page seemed to hold the possibility of another secret, another story waiting to be unearthed. He stayed in contact with Camille, who was now invited to conferences and interviews around the world, but she refused the spotlight. "The story isn't mine," she would say. "It belongs to Hasselberg, and to all of us." The $80 million fund remained untouched, protected, but its existence had changed the world. Civil organizations began to form inspired by Hasselberg's manifesto. Movements for transparency, scientific ethics, and freedom of the press gained strength. The Guardian of the Future, as Hasselberg came to be called, became a modern myth. One night, Arthur received a letter, no sender. Inside, only one sentence. "You fulfilled your role. Now the world needs to decide what to do with the truth." He smiled. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. That same night, he went up to the library's rooftop. The city shone below him, alive, chaotic, imperfect, but full of possibilities. He thought of Hasselberg, of Camille, of the man in the gray suit, of all those who had protected that secret for so long. And then he thought of the future. Because, in the end, that was what it had all been about. Not money, not power, but hope. About believing that even in the darkest moments, someone, somewhere, would be willing to light a candle. Arthur returned to his desk, opened a new notebook, and wrote on the first page, "Fortune holder is not a fund. It is a promise. And promises, when made with truth, transcend time." And so, the guardian of silence became the messenger of hope.
If this story touched you, if it made you think about the world we live in and what we are building for the future, tell me where you're listening from. Leave your comment, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with 3 friends who also believe that the truth, even when hidden, always finds a way to surface. Thank you for listening to Fortune Holder, the $80 million secret that was never meant to be revealed. See you in the next episode. And remember, sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who live in silence.